Yes, let's do that. Where do we want where do we want to start with this chat? 'Cause I remember, should we start with your client question that you had the other day again,
Yeah,
and
sure.
run through that?
Okay, so one of my clients asked the other day if you have a low underactive, if you have sentences are hard, if you have an underactive thyroid, do you need to change your nutrition and diet? Um, so if you are taking medication for thyroid issues, then no, not really. And if you are not taking medication, then go talk to your doctor. Would you like to explain what an underactive thyroid is?
Yeah, so well, I'll start by kind of describing what the thyroid is and does to start with, in quite simple terms. And basically, it's just a gland in your neck. It produces a couple of hormones, one called T3, one called T4, if you're interested. And they basically regulate kind of our metabolism and a lot of the metabolic processes in the body. Um, and having a low T3 or T4 or underactive thyroid, essentially, where it's not producing as many, means that our metabolism will begin to drop. Kind of the symptoms that you might notice is kind of weight gain. Obviously, as our metabolism drops, we use less calories in a day. We'll probably still want to eat the same, so we tend to see our weight go up. We're really tired. Sometimes it can lead to a bit of depression, that sort of thing. Dry skin, hair, muscle aching, that kind of thing. Conversely, you can get hyperthyroidism, a bit less common, but that obviously leads to kind of weight loss and a lot of similar symptoms actually to hypothyroidism, but the kind of weight gain versus weight loss is kind of probably the big difference there. You can get it tested quite easily if you think that is your kind of what you've got. You just go to the doctors, they'll do a test for it, they'll come back and they'll tell you, oh yeah, X, Y, Z is low or high, and they'll be able to treat you very effectively for that. So speaking about your hypothyroidism, which is the low T3 or T4, they'll treat that with something called levothyroxine, which will bring your levels back up to normal. And once you're at normal, it's called euthyroid, when you're back to normal levels, your metabolism will stabilize, it'll be back to where it was beforehand. So from that side of things, provided you're medicated properly, and that's something that will be reviewed with the GP quite regularly, nothing needs to change. You can imagine that you're back to being a perfectly healthy human with no issues, essentially, from a nutrition and training point of view. Nothing should need to be any different. So eat a normal, healthy, balanced diet, train as you would expect to train normally, and then we just apply all exactly the same rules from there.
Yeah, thanks very much. That was a good explanation. I think people often worry about how their metabolisms might be impacting their attempts at dieting or being healthy. So if you are unsure, if you do think that there's something wrong, you do need to go see your doctor, just to check. And yeah, with thyroid issues, if you're medicated, then sticking to normal nutrition practices will be fine. If your metabolism issues are related to PCOS, however, then you do have to make changes, because it can't be treated as easily. Do you want to explain what PCOS is?
Yeah, I'm going to get up a page quickly just so that I can remember the exact terms, because I don't want to get it wrong. So PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, obviously only a woman thing, but it does have or can have quite a marked impact on your metabolism. Now, as this is probably quite a slight side issue, but as we kind of diet normally or try and lose weight normally, we kind of get this adaptive effect on our metabolism quite often, which can be as much as up to sort of 20% at the top end decrease in metabolism, but it won't go past that, and that will happen quite quickly as we hit like the deficit. In polycystic ovary syndrome, that's been noted to be up to as much as I think 40% in some cases. So there's actually like a massive decrease compared to what we would expect, and also what your baseline was, which does have a huge issue on when it comes to either losing weight or maintaining weight, because whatever you're eating is now 40% too much, and that what you'll see from that is your weight will just start to go like this, and then it's actually quite difficult to lose it again, because unless you're quite a heavy or quite a big person, actually, I think we used the example of a 60-kilo person last time. If you're trying to eat in a deficit and your metabolism has gone down by 40%, that means you're going to have to be eating something like 700 or 800 calories a day, which is 4 bananas, I think I said last time, something like that. It's literally no food at all,
really
which makes life really difficult. Other kind of symptoms that you might find in PCOS is kind of you'll get irregular periods or none potentially. Excess androgens, which are things like testosterone, which is why we start to see kind of like extra kind of hair growth, often like around like facial hair and things like that, which obviously isn't particularly pleasant for a lot of people. And polycystic ovaries, which is something that needs to be kind of checked by, I think it's MRI or X-ray. If you've got 2 of those features, then you can be diagnosed with PCOS. Treatments for the excess androgens is normally like the pill, just because the concept of the pill kind of mops up the free testosterone that's floating around your body and can help with those symptoms. And there's some other drugs called like metformin, which is often used for type 2 diabetes, but does also have a lot of crossover for PCOS in terms of insulin resistance, which is another kind of side effect or symptom of it, which can help you kind of manage your weight a bit better and avoid those sort of diabetic type issues. But otherwise, it comes down to kind of exercise and nutrition for the mainstay of management, I think, where we have to be quite intelligent with how we go about that.
Yeah, so PCOS is often found in women who are overweight or obese, but interestingly, it's also fairly prominent in athletic women too. So a larger portion of athletic women have PCOS than of all women in general. And the theory is that maybe it's because the extra testosterone just makes them a bit stronger and a bit faster. So it's not all doom and gloom. But you do have to be a bit savvier with your nutrition when it comes to PCOS. I have a few clients that have PCOS, so it's been interesting to see how implementing different practices has been helpful. One thing that has seemed to do something is something called, oh no, the word's gone.
Inositol.
Inositol, thank you. Which you can actually just buy over the internet. And it works in the same way that metformin does, and it's just a supplement, and it comes in a powdered form, and taking 2 to 4-ish grams a day seems to have a positive impact on symptoms. So that includes like menstrual cycle and facial hair and weight loss, and is it just made out of sugar? What's it made?
It is a sugar, but that doesn't mean it's the same. It's like sugar is like sugar is the name of like a type of molecular structure a lot of the time, rather than table sugar.
Yeah.
So that's the scientific term rather than a colloquial one. But I think I think it's worth mentioning on that front of inositol just briefly that actually I think it's, as far as I'm aware, it's not something that's recommended by like NICE or MHRA or anything like that for the treatment of, but it's been seen kind of anecdotally, but also in practice to have a positive benefit with very, very few side effects, normally just on like the gastric side of things sometimes, which is why dose it gradually. So it's deemed pretty safe, but I think from a medical point of view, they'll tend to go down the route of prescribing metformin because that's just what's in the guidance. So if obviously feel free to speak to a doctor, but don't be surprised if they haven't heard of it or aren't sure about it. It is something that is safe, if you want to have a look at more of it. I think examine.com have probably got quite a good a bunch of information on it with some linked research articles. So if you're not sure, have a look there. But it does, yeah, it's definitely been seen to have positive benefits from that side of things. But just to let people know that it might not be something their doctors necessarily know about because it's not prescribed as such. It's more of a supplement.
Yeah, and as an aside to that, examine.com has loads of really, really good information on all sorts of supplements and different diets and other nutritional things. So if you're ever interested in learning about something in particular, you can probably find it on that website.
Yeah. So I was going to talk a little bit more about inositol quickly while we're here, just to give it more background to it. So we want to be buying the Myo inositol, I believe, which is the one that does the work, and it is naturally very present in our body anyway, which is why it's more from a supplement than a medication. It's just like, think of it like taking creatine, right? You've got some in your body anyway. You're just kind of boosting the amounts. So it's quite an important. It is a sugar, but it's quite an important sugar that we have in our bodies naturally. And I think there's something about it having an impact on mental health as well, potentially, but often it can be quite low, and I think that's probably why it has its benefit, because somehow in that kind of the system of polycystic ovary syndrome, the levels drop, or we don't have as much produced. So possibly by kind of supplementing, we actually kind of can really increase our levels to what they should be. I think that's probably why we see the effects we do. If that kind of clears it up and makes people a bit more confident about potentially using it.
Yeah, awesome. And then other things with PCOS that will be helpful, as we said before, because of the huge reduction in metabolic rate, it means either you have to eat far fewer calories or move more. Now, when it comes to figuring out how much less calories to go for, don't go straight in with the 40% reduction, because that's a guess. So you might not be there. It might not be that much. So whenever I'm working with my clients, I'll work out what their BMR is and then start by reducing 10% and just see after a week if that has made a positive difference or not. And then if that wasn't enough, then go down more. But I personally would go that way rather than going from 40% and then coming back.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good point. That the 20 or 40% that I referenced at the start, probably should have clarified, is kind of the most extreme that's been observed, I think, rather than the norm. So Pennie's route is, I think probably the most sensible one of, start at your top end and then gradually decrease the minimum you absolutely have to, because that's going to make your life more enjoyable. You don't want to have to be eating like a mouse if you don't have to be. And also actually kind of making that deficit up of a combination of training and nutrition is probably also an easier way, so you can eat a little bit more than you might otherwise have to, because you're kind of training at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And also just making sure that you're moving. So right now that would be going out for your walk every day, maybe finding reasons to walk up and down the stairs periodically throughout the day, just so you're keeping your steps up. Because if you can keep yourself moving more, then that's going to have a higher cost to your metabolism. So then by the end of the day, you will have required more calories, which means you don't have to be eating as little. And I think dieting anyway is hard, but if you have PCOS, it's much harder. So finding ways to make it easier for yourself is going to be really beneficial. And the easiest way is probably by trying to just increase your activity levels.
Yeah, and I think from that side of things as well, exercise tends to have a bit of an improvement on our kind of insulin sensitivity too. So that's going to have a twofold benefit, as well as all the other benefits of training and being kind of cardiovascularly healthy. Any benefits we can make to improving our insulin sensitivity in both polycystic ovary and type 2 diabetes as well, which we'll come on to talk about in a minute, it's going to be really beneficial in the long run for you, because it's just going to help. It'll help everything across the board, really.
Yeah, for sure. And if you are resistant to insulin, just making sure that you are doing stuff regularly. So weight training or body weight training or doing some kind of like HIIT training maybe. Those things will be helpful. And if you're not sure how to do that in your house with the equipment that you've got right now, just contact one of us and I'm sure we'll be able to help you.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to quickly touch on type 2 diabetes then to finish?
Yeah, and I'll have a quick overview of that. So I'm sure probably you've heard of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is generally, well, it is the one that is like the lifelong option, I'll say. It's more genetic than anything else, and that's where your pancreas just stops producing insulin. It normally presents kind of when you're a kid, and that's when you'll be kind of on insulin, and you have to be taking the insulin regularly for your whole life. Otherwise, you die, basically. Type 2 is something that is more commonly seen as like adult onset, although with our kind of rising obesity levels, we are starting to see more and more creeping into like our younger people and almost to a degree like kids in some ways. So there's it's kind of twofold. There's a big genetic component to it in the sense of, especially like in our kind of, I think Afro-Caribbean and like African and also somewhat like the kind of Asian populations tend to be a bit more predisposed, I believe, to type 2 diabetes, whether they're kind of overweight or not. But there is also a massive factor of obesity and overweight on whether you're kind of predisposed to getting it as well. Essentially, it's in most cases a factor of like insulin resistance building up over time. And what happens is, you know, we overeat calories rather than specifically sugar over a long period of time. Insulin is the hormone that is there to kind of drive things into cells. So it kind of gets the sugar out of the blood and like push it into the cells where it's converted into glycogen and stored, basically. Now, what happens is as we kind of overeating over a long period of time, obviously there's more sugar and other stuff that needs to be moved continually. So our body upregulates the amount of insulin we produce. And then over time, our cells kind of they get used to that increased amount. They kind of, let's put it really simply, they kind of get bored of listening to it and they're just like, no, I've had enough. So you have to keep producing more and more and more to try and keep pushing it in. And that's where we kind of get this insulin resistance. And what happens then is the level of like sugar in the blood goes up basically when it should be all in our cells and being stored. It's just floating around our body, and that's what causes our issues. It can cause loads of issues, such as like issues with the kidneys, issues with your eyes, issues with your nerves, because it's just not supposed to be there. So if you think you've got it and you're kind of having, hyperglycemic attacks where we get really low blood sugar, things like that. So it will start to feel really tired, drowsy. And if you think you've got it, go and get tested. It's really easy to test. They can just check for you and they'll probably give you some sort of medication. Initially, they'll say diet and exercise, which we'll come on to discuss as probably the most important long-term benefits or will have the biggest long-term impact on it, I believe. And also will help you to avoid having to go down the route of more medications and eventually insulin, which you want to avoid, really. So yeah, there's loads of medications for. I won't go into them all, but they'll help. They basically just help to manage your blood sugar and improve your insulin sensitivity. So what you do eat, basically the sugar from that will kind of hopefully get distributed better, and you won't just have this like these fluctuations in blood sugar, and also you won't get the long-term negatives.
No, go on. Sorry.
I was going to say, so we'll just discuss the nutrition side of it because obviously the rest of it we manage by your GP.
I just want to reiterate that it's caused by overconsumption of calories rather than sugar, which James mentioned, just because I think it's a common misconception. People blame eating sugar for causing diabetes when it isn't like sugar's fault in isolation. And it doesn't mean that you have to stop eating sugar or stop eating carbs. Often, even if you don't eat any sugar, if you're still eating too much food, then you're still going to gain weight and you could still end up with this resistance to the insulin. So I just wanted to make that clear because I know a lot of people think that sugar is the devil, and it's not.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of quite important because obviously the end result of overeating calories and is that your blood sugar is going to be higher because obviously the body can create glucose from fats and from protein. So yeah, overconsumption of everything, the body will create glucose for energy one way or another. So we can end up with the same issue.
Yeah. So if from a diet and exercise perspective, starting off by just trying to, I guess, create a deficit. If your diabetes has been triggered by you being overweight, starting but trying to just reduce your weight a bit can help. And I think the research says that even just a 5% reduction in body weight can improve your symptoms a bit.
Yeah, I think in reality any weight loss at all is going to be beneficial to you. Yeah, obviously getting back down to a kind of I want to say normal weight, but that's probably not the right term. Let's say healthy weight.
Aiming for like a healthy BMI, even though people don't really like BMI as a measure.
It's quite a good measure for people who are sedentary or it's only a bad measure if you've got really high levels of muscle mass. I think, which let's be honest, most people probably don't have, unless you're like a bodybuilder or you've been training for a long time. So it can be quite effective, certainly to start with, to give you a guide. I think. So yeah, let's say you're trying to get into it within a healthy BMI range, and certainly out of the obese BMI range is going to be beneficial for you, in that sense.
Yeah, and so to do that, you just want to start by reducing your calories. So if you are obese, you probably don't even need to count calories, although you can. Counting calories is always going to be the most efficient way of knowing how many calories you're actually eating. But you could start reducing your calories in other ways. So like reducing portion sizes or creating time windows for eating, or like reducing snacks between meals or whatever. Like there are loads of different ways that you can do it, so finding whatever is helpful for you and that you can stick to will be the most beneficial, but just finding a way to consistently reduce your calories enough that you can start seeing that downward trend.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's you're trying to reverse more than likely years of kind of less than optimal habits and eating. So yeah, be prepared for it to take a little while. Obviously, it will depend on how driven you are to make the change, as to whether you fully overhaul your environment, as we discussed at the start, to kind of lead you down a path that's going to be productive long term. I think probably it's important to think about the fact that if you don't do it, the diabetes will get worse. It's not going to get better, more than likely. And kind of the harsh reality of that is it's going to lead to significant health issues. Like often the end results are like blindness, real bad kidney issues, loads of pain. People have their feet amputated and stuff like that right at the end of, towards the end of the road. So it's definitely something that you want to try and avoid if you can. And just making simple changes now, if you especially just been diagnosed, or even if you've been diagnosed for a while, will help stave off those really unpleasant, later effects that you don't want to have to deal with. And it doesn't have to be, no one's saying, right, you've got to come and get a six pack. They're just saying, let's think about trying to make the most of our situation now and actually, pull ourselves back into that healthy range. And it's definitely doable. It's not easy, but that's what people like Pennie and I here for, is that support, and get your family involved, get people involved to try and help you, support you on that journey and do stuff with you. It's probably quite a good way of doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Support's really important. And when it comes to the training side of things, if you are obese or overweight and you've never really done anything before, then anything you do is going to be helpful. So like going for a walk or just doing exercises from sitting in a chair, because it's more than what you were doing before, and because the energy tax of carrying a heavy body around is going to be quite high. Anything you do is going to be helpful. So you can create your calorie deficit by just eating a small amount less, and then making sure that you go for a walk every day and try and do like some body weight exercises at whatever level feels manageable for you. You don't have to go straight into doing like really hardcore workouts. Anything is fine.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important. Is that you don't have, it's totally understandable that you might feel that training as a concept is too far, if that makes sense. So, even if it is just from wherever you are now, make sure that every day you're going out for an hour's walk, or you don't have to run even. You just walk or move or just do more. It's going to be a step in the right direction, and then eventually, when you feel more comfortable, you can start just playing around with things that you think might be fun. Do a few online classes, or go for a swim, or whatever it might be. But yeah, I think from that side of things, exercise is great. Nutrition is always going to be a mainstay there, and something that especially now you probably can actually focus on relatively easily. I would expect, based on the fact that you can, you're stuck at home and you can play around with cooking healthy food and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think there are definitely lots of things that you can do, and having the diagnosis doesn't mean that it's like that's it now. You can still make a change if you want to, and implementing some of the habit changes we were mentioning at the beginning will be really helpful. And then generally just going for a walk and having a look at your diet, and maybe like doing a little audit similar to like the habit audit that James was talking about earlier, where you sit down and you write down everything you've eaten and be like, okay, what can I realistically change, and pick 2 or 3 things, and then just change that for the week, and then maybe reevaluate every Sunday and be like, okay, what can I do this time? To then keep gradually changing as you go along. Or if you are someone who is like, I don't know, an A-type person, and you can change lots of things at the same time, you can do that, but don't feel like you have to.
Yeah,
personal.
I think that was quite a good roundup.
Yeah, I think so.
Of our kind of weekly discussions.
Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.
Yes, we will. If you've got any questions or anything on the bits that we've discussed, just pop them in the comments, and either, I guess, Penny or I'll be able to answer those questions for you. I think Penny probably got the time code for different times we discuss stuff. Like, if you want to have a look at the diabetes element, I'm hoping there'll be some kind of bits there that just kind of we can link you to. Yeah, and if you've got any questions, just ask.
See you next time.
See you later.